X, Pearl, and Maxine. Ty West's instantly iconic horror trilogy that homages slashers and pulls back the curtain into people's real-life craving for fame and fortune. Exploring the horrors that come along with these desires and glamour through a slightly different lens with every new chapter. Each installment taking a look at human relations as a result of the type of media people consume. The first film in the trilogy, X, tackles the rise of independent filmmaking in the 1970s and its influence on society while paying tribute to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I will not accept a life I do not deserve.
The following film, Pearl, takes a look at the rise of Disney-esque Technicolor melodramas and their influences on societal shifts in the early 1900s.
One day the whole world's gonna know my name.
And finally, Maxine explores the innovation of home video in the 1980s, all in a classic giallo horror film style with some Brian De Palma thrown in for good measure.
Ain't nobody else like me.
If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and comment if you'd like to join in on the discussion. It really helps the channel out. And be sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. Now let's get into Ty West's X Trilogy. In November of 2020, A24 Films announced that they would be producing a horror film titled simply X, and it would be written and directed by Ty West. The movie would star Mia Goth, Scott Muschietti, aka Kid Cudi, who was also executive producing, Jenna Ortega, and Brittany Snow. Ty West got his start making small but successful horror and thriller movies like The Roost and Triggerman, before hitting it big with The House of the Devil in 2009.
Are you not the babysitter?
No, I'm not the babysitter. My friend.
After that, West directed Cabin Fever 2, the sequel to Eli Roth's original horror comedy. But after producers tore the movie apart with extensive reshoots and edits, West disowned it. He claimed it was more of a product of producers and executives, even going so far as to requesting his name be taken off and changed to Alan Smithy, though this request was denied by the producers. For those not in the know, Alan Smithy is the official pseudonym for directors who want to disclaim a project and have their real name stricken from the final product. There's an urban legend that suggests that the name Alan Smithy was picked because it's an anagram of the phrase the Alias Men, but this has been proven apocryphal. After the slight misstep that was Cabin Fever 2, West would find continued success with The Innkeepers in 2011 and The Sacrament in 2013, which was produced by Eli Roth. Apparently something good came of directing Cabin Fever 2. After continuing to work on horror projects like VHS and directing an episode of MTV's Scream TV series, West hooked up with A24 for X. The star and anchor of the X trilogy, Mia Goth, got her start in modeling when she was only 14, eventually auditioning for movies when she was 16. She soon won her first role in Lars von Trier's 2013 film, Nymphomaniac. After Nymphomaniac, Goth appeared in more lead roles in movies like The Survivalist, A Cure for Wellness, the Suspiria remake, High Life, and Emma.
The whole world's gonna know my name.
Although the movie takes place in Texas, it was shot in the Manawatu region of the North Island of New Zealand from February 16th to March 16th, 2021. Principal photography took place in and around the city of Wanganui, with production based mainly at a farm in the settlement of Ferdell, where production constructed the barn in the movie themselves. Filming also took place in the Rangitike district of Bulls, where they shot at the Old Town Hall. Tyler Bates composed the movie score with Chelsea Wolfe, creating a soundtrack emphasizing synthesizers and vocals. Chelsea Wolfe also did a cover of Wee Wee Marie, which came out a week before the movie's premiere. X tells the story of a group of young, let's say, filmmakers in 1979 who set out to make an adult film in rural Texas. This guy Wayne aims to take advantage of the recent innovation of videotape by taking a few strippers and filming them while they make love. He even finds himself a pretentious young film student to shoot the whole thing to give it some class, like he's Jack Horner or something.
This is a film I want them to remember me by.
It is possible to make a good dirty movie.
The film opens with a brilliant shot using the barn door frame to establish a 4:3 ratio, setting the vibe right away with a 70s tone and then pushing into a more modern one. The whole movie is a beautiful homage to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, I thought the gang might pick up a certain hitchhiker during the movie's opening moments.
They died better that way.
The movie also homages Mario Bava horror movies and is a throwback to exploitative 70s horror in general, as well as borrowing elements from movies like Psycho, Hardcore,
Kid's a good director. UCLA.
The Shining, Boogie Nights, and of course, Alligator.
Move, you mean old ugly bitch!
Of course, X also has allusions to pornographic and erotic films like Debbie Does Dallas and Andy Warhol's Blue Movie. Not that I've seen those or even know what they are. The whole angle of filming a porno at the farm is such a great idea. It's no secret that slashers are usually an excuse for young horny audiences to see attractive teens go to a secluded location, party, have sex, and die. It's also no secret that some more puritanical people are really bothered by the TNA in most slashers. And most of the time they are right about it being sort of unnecessary.
When did you become such a prude?
But this movie gives it an actual good reason to be there. It turns the tired idea of having to have gratuitous nudity and a slasher on its head and centers the plot on it. It offers some legitimacy to the sex and nudity and gives some quality to the theme.
Oh my God, you're so big.
Okay, not always.
Toast to the perverts.
Here, here. To the perverts.
It does offer up a great scene with some good tension when the sound girl, who happens to be the camera guy's girlfriend, wants to get involved in the production in front of the camera, and he has to put his own beliefs about sexuality to the test. Must have been Sunday.
When did you become such a prude?
The title of the movie, X, is an obvious reference to the X rating used by the MPAA. From 1968 to 1990, the MPAA would use the X rating for a movie that was only suitable for adult audiences. Movies that contain stuff like extreme violence, strong sexual themes, and graphic language.
What's the big fucking deal, bitch?
The thing was, though, that unlike the other ratings from the MPAA, the X rating was not trademarked, allowing filmmakers to release their films in theaters without needing to submit it to the MPAA for an age certificate. From the late 1960s to around the mid-80s, many of your favorite classic movies were rated X, though most of these movies that did achieve critical and commercial success would eventually be re-edited to an R rating. Since the X rating wasn't trademarked, that meant anyone could apply it to their films. And that's exactly what the porn industry did in the 70s, exploiting the rule and releasing pornos in theaters under the rating. Eventually, due to the heavy use of the X rating by pornographic films, the rating became synonymous with them. This led to movie theaters refusing to show films with an X rating, forcing even X-rated films that were not pornographic to be re-edited to gain an R rating, or release unrated, sometimes with a warning that the film contained adult-only content. In 1990, the MPAA eventually discontinued the X rating and replaced it with NC-17, meaning it was trademarked and could only be applied by the MPAA itself. Most theaters would not show films with the rating, resulting in censorship yet again. The whole cast of X is great. Brittany Snow is good playing against type as a porn star, it's Kid Cudi's first movie, Noah from The Ring is in it, and of course Jenna Ortega is in it, fresh off of the 5th Scream movie that same year.
Would you like to play a game?
Mia Goth cements herself as a true Scream queen with a whole new trilogy starting with this one, pulling double duty as characters Maxine and Pearl. For the portrayal of the much more elderly character of Pearl, Mia Goth had to wear extensive prosthetic makeup. She'd basically do 10 hours in the makeup chair, and then work a 12-hour day on set. The editing is also particularly cool. The effect of cutting scenes from the next scene into the current one is a good way to move the film forward. This, of course, is a reference to an editing technique from Easy Rider, which is well known for kickstarting a new era of movies in Hollywood. There's also a lot of standout moments with the cinematography. It's an A-caliber film dressed up as a B-movie. There's also a nice little unexpected musical scene in the middle.
And I saw my reflection in the snow-covered hill.
Anyway, here's Wonderwall.
And after all the story and sex is laid out, it's time for the killin'. It's the Texas Grandma Massacre. It turns out that the reclusive elderly couple that Wayne rented the cabin he planned on shooting at from is aware of what they've been up to. Not only that, but it seems like they've been luring people to their farm for decades and killing them. Oh, and also using them as sex slaves. Before long, the film crew finds themselves fighting for their lives. The kills in the movie are good. Pearl repeatedly stabbing the camera guy in the neck over and over, causing everything to turn red, is great. Even the smaller moments are good, like when the barefoot Wayne steps right on a nail in the barn. The movie has its fair share of special effects too. The aforementioned scene where Pearl stabs RJ in the neck used a retractable prop knife, a prosthetic neck with a slit in it, and tubing that allowed the fake blood to spurt out of the slit. For the scene where Wayne gets stabbed in the eyes with a pitchfork, the effects studio made a dummy of Wayne's upper body and head. Lots of the kills are actually foreshadowed in the movie. Jackson claims he's had enough farmers trying to shoot at him for one lifetime from his experiences in Vietnam. Then Bobby Lynn is killed by an alligator. And when we first meet her in the beginning of the movie, what's on the mural behind her? Howard mentions his heart problems early on.
You know I can't. My heart.
And he eventually dies of a heart attack near the end.
I wouldn't want to give the old codger a heart attack. Would you?
He also mentions that he doesn't want Pearl to fall and break her hip. And she does at the end after being thrown back from the blowback of the shotgun.
My hip.
Wayne says,
People's eyes are gonna pop out of their damn skulls when they see this.
Then dies in a similar way. There's a cow that's been hit by a car near the beginning of the movie and they drive right through its guts.
Just when you thought you'd escape the slaughterhouse.
And that's exactly how Maxine kills Pearl at the end of the movie.
I hate blood and guts.
The film is also a great modern-day example of the psycho-biddy horror subgenre. Psycho-biddy, sometimes referred to as hagsploitation or hag horror, are movies that feature a mix of horror, thriller, and older female characters, usually involving aging women who are violent or mentally unwell, while also heavily critiquing ageism and the societal expectations placed on aging female bodies. Movies like Blood and Lace, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Sunset Boulevard, Brain Dead, or even more modern takes like The Taking of Deborah Logan, Last Night in Soho, or that fucking awesome film The Substance.
You wouldn't exist without me.
The movie does have its sad moments with the elderly Pearl that make you feel surprisingly sympathetic for her. It sure makes you never want to get old.
Tell me how
yours. You still want me.
X is a great love letter to slashers, and it's also a great modern-day slasher on its own. It's a movie about the power of beauty and the regret that can come with age, about not conforming to society's norms, and the consequences of what that might mean.
It will be our secret.
X premiered at South by Southwest on March 13th, 2022, and had its wide release in the US the following week on March 18th, 2022, where it grossed $4.3 million on its opening weekend, hitting number 4 after The Batman, Jujutsu Kaisen 0, and Uncharted. It eventually grossed $11.8 million in the US and Canada, and $3.3 million in other territories for a worldwide total of $15.1 million, officially making it a box office hit against its $1 million budget. Critics and fans alike loved it across the board, praising the movie's homage to classic slashers, and Ty West for going back to his horror roots and taking risks. It's safe to say the movie was a complete success. And you know what happens with successful movies, right? They get prequels. During the production of X, Ty West and Mia Goth worked on a backstory for the character of Pearl and eventually developed it into a full-blown story for a new film. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and seeing its impact on the film industry, West was inspired to keep working and decided to start writing a prequel to X with Mia Goth immediately after wrapping, and A24 greenlit the movie right away. When it came to which horror genre Pearl would be emulating, West turned to Douglas Sirk melodramas from the 1950s, and melded them with a Technicolor style of movies like Mary Poppins and The Wizard of Oz to make a, quote, demented Disney movie, exploring how Hollywood filmmaking has influenced everyday people. In July 2020, it was announced that David Corenswet, Tandy Wright, Matthew Sunderland, and Emma Jenkins-Piro would feature as the supporting cast, and Mia Goth would reprise her role as a younger version of Pearl. Filming was done in secret immediately following X. Once again, filming in New Zealand and using the same set that was built for X. The crew of Avatar: The Way of Water were on a production break at the time, and since they had already completed their required period of self-isolation, they were ready to work safely during the pandemic. This time our focus is on Pearl, the killer old lady from X, but this time we get to see a younger version of her in 1918. This extraordinary prequel has a pretty different vibe right off the bat, with its sweeping Hollywood score and classic title font. Pearl dreams of becoming a tiller girl, a star dancing in the movies. She yearns to leave her unfulfilling farm life for stardom, but is held down by her strict authoritarian mother who disapproves of her dreams, as well as her sick father who needs both their care and attention.
One day you'll understand that getting what you want isn't what's important. Making the most of what you have is.
There's also an influenza epidemic in town everyone's worrying about. This was based on the Great Influenza Epidemic from 1918 to 1920 that really happened, but was also influenced by the COVID pandemic happening 100 years later in real life.
It's hard to know who anyone is nowadays with all these masks people are wearing.
Pearl spends her days singing and dancing in the barn, dreaming about her life outside this place, fantasizing that she's part of an old Hollywood musical. And she names all her animals after her favorite Hollywood actors.
That's Charlie. This is Mary. This is Francis.
But Pearl also has a dark side to her, killing small, helpless animals like geese and feeding them to the alligator Theta, who she's named after actress Theda Bara.
Theta! Go on, girl!
Pearl also gets a whole background with her family, dealing with her husband Howard, who's out fighting in World War I, and there's plenty of side characters to choose from.
Sister-in-laws have to stick together, right?
The movie is full of standout scenes. The Scarecrow scene is very eerie, but funny and kind of sweet in a dark way. The Scarecrow is a very lifelike effigy, and it seems like it's going to come to life any second. The kitchen scene is also brutal and painful to watch. After her mother chastises her for having dreams she deems childish and futile, Pearl gets into a fight with her and it leads to her accidentally getting her dress caught on fire. Pearl attempts to douse the fire with a pot of boiling water, which ends up killing her mother, and she hides the body in the basement.
I want you to remember what it feels like, because that's how I felt every time you looked at me.
The supporting cast is good too. Tandy Wright is great as Pearl's mother, Emma Jenkins-Piro, who plays Howard's sister Misty, is good, and David Corenswet is good playing a projectionist who talks about how he thinks pornography will take over the movie someday, foreshadowing the themes of the upcoming narratives of X and Maxine.
Pictures like this are going to revolutionize the industry, and I, for one, plan on capitalizing early.
By the way, the film that the projectionist shows Pearl is actually a stag film from 1915 or 17 called A Free Ride, depicting a motorist who picks up two women and later has sex with them. A Free Ride is considered to be the earliest surviving American pornographic film. Not that I've seen one or even know what they are.
That's what porno is. It's fantasy. It's taking the normal and making it abnormal.
Pearl ends up sleeping with the projectionist, and after she senses him pulling away, Mia Goth turns out an intense performance. All of Pearl's frustrations come to a boil.
Why are you leaving me? What did you say? Why did you change?
You're scaring me, Pearl.
And the projectionist's ensuing murder scene is good too. Misty informs Pearl of a dancing audition, and there's a great fantastical scene where Pearl envisions herself dancing in front of the judges in an impressive song and dance routine complete with a chorus line and everything. The scene is ultimately heartbreaking though, when Pearl is turned down for not being young, blonde, or all-American enough.
Someone with X Factor.
Pearl sees her mother and family judging her in front of a cross, all the things that are holding her back and telling her no.
Please, I'm a star!
The best part, though, is after Pearl is turned down at the audition, Mitzi, in an attempt to console her, tells her to get out all her feelings regarding Howard through her. What follows is an Oscar-worthy 9-minute confession monologue. It's mesmerizing yet terrifying at the same time.
I made sure to always be mindful with your heart.
You know I can't. My heart.
Not to mention the ending where Howard returns home from the war to find that Pearl has set up the decomposing bodies of her parents in a makeshift dinner scene, followed by Mia Goth smiling at the camera for just under 2 minutes under the closing credits. This deranged smile was unplanned, with Ty West refusing to call cut and waiting to see what would happen. The film builds upon the themes of the original, but somehow seems to make them even more unsettling. These themes of regret, loss, obsession, sexual frustration and repression, or even war are made better by a stronger story and better characters. For lack of a better word, Pearl is a lot deeper than X. There's a lot more going on in this one. Pearl is a great tragic character. Her strict mother and invalid father aren't the only things tying her down. Her marriage to Howard only acts as another anchor for her, trapping her in her own personal prison. Pearl's frustrations manifest in scenes like her finding and smashing an alligator egg while she's thinking of Howard. She imagines him perishing just like the egg, wishing he would die so she could be set free, destroying what others would nurture. Similarly, during her speech, Pearl reveals that she had a miscarriage, and that she was secretly relieved when it happened.
I love the feeling of it growing inside me, pulling and sucking on me like some needy animal in a barn.
It was one less thing to hold her down and tie her to the farm forever. To recapture that feeling of control, Pearl starts killing small animals, eventually graduating to humans. Pearl's dreams are fairly relatable, and despite how evil we see she is, we do want to see her escape the farm. We've seen where she ends up in X, that she doesn't make it to stardom, but the movie is so good we want her to anyway. And when she ultimately doesn't make it, we feel for her. Her over-the-top reaction, though permeated with dark humor, still slightly breaks our heart for the budding serial killer. Pearl has made some irreversible decisions, though, and has to live with them when her dreams are rejected, which is also something that's relatable. We all have dreams, and most of us know what it's like to see them fall to the wayside. Pearl fails and accepts her fate, deciding that her mother was right.
It's not about what I want anymore, Mitzi. It's about making the best of what I have.
She makes her own imaginary amends to her mother, and she sets the dinner table in an attempt to atone for her sins and to make a home for Howard.
I'm so happy you're home.
This deeper character background for Pearl makes a second viewing of X even better, strengthening when the older Pearl meets Maxine in the 70s. She reminds her of her younger self, and she sees regret in her, kickstarting her rage.
I was young once, too.
After filming, Ty West edited the movie in March 2022 and went to Nashville, Tennessee to record the score with Tyler Bates and Timothy Williams. In contrast to X, Bates and Williams wanted Pearl to have a classic Hollywood cinema soundtrack, and drew inspiration from composers like Bernard Herrmann, John Barry, Henry Mancini, and Ennio Morricone. After Chelsea Wolfe covered Wee Wee Marie for X, West put the original version by Arthur Fields as the diegetic track when Pearl goes to see the fictional Palace Follies in the movie.
Poor Johnny's heart went pity-pity-pat somewhere in sunny France.
And when Pearl pushes the projectionist and his car into the swamp, she says,
Au revoir, poor Johnny!
Which is in reference to the song's first line, Poor Johnny's Heart. In X, Pearl dances to the song after she kills RJ, and that's the song that plays as Maxine drives off as our final girl. Pearl had its world premiere at the 79th Venice International Film Festival on September 3rd, 2022, followed by a wide theatrical release on September 16th in the US, only 6 months after X. It debuted at $3.1 million, finishing third at the box office behind The Woman King and Barbarian. It went on to make $10.1 million on a budget of $4.8 million. Once again, the critics were into it, praising the screenplay, cinematography, score, Ty West directing, and Mia Goth's performance, calling Pearl an instant horror icon. Martin Scorsese was even reportedly impressed by the movie, calling it mesmerizing, and stating that it was powered by a pure, undiluted love for cinema. The movie also ended up on most best horror lists of 2022, and a sequel was announced right after Pearl's first Midnight Madness showing at the 2022 Toronto International Film Festival. In March 2022, 6 months before Pearl would premiere, Ty West announced that he was working on the script for the third and final film in the X series. It would take place after the first film in the trilogy, and this time emulate Mario Bava movies while continuing to explore cinema's influence on society. West would once again serve as writer and director, as well as producer, while Mia Goth would reprise her role as the eponymous Maxine Minx from the first film and serve as executive producer. In January 2023, Goth stated that the script was complete and that the story was, in her opinion, the best of the series so far. Many of the previous production members returned, and principal photography started in Los Angeles in April 2023 and ended in May for a 7-week shoot. The film has a star-studded cast this time around with Elizabeth Debicki, Moses Sumney, Michelle Monaghan, Bobby Cannavale, Lily Collins, Sophie Thatcher, Halsey, Giancarlo Esposito, and Kevin Bacon.
We've all got blood on our hands now.
We're back with Maxine as the sole survivor of the previous film's massacre. Starting off with an opening scene about a younger Maxine that harkens back to the closing televangelist scenes from X.
I will not accept a life I do not deserve.
We then get a similar opening to X with the giant studio doors representing the film's aspect ratio. This is just one of the movie's many references to X and Pearl, but we'll get to those in a minute. It feels good to be back with Maxine and the story moving forward from X after the prequel detour that was Pearl. It feels like we're back at it again. We get a slightly new, more confident version of Maxine. She's out to take over Hollywood and won't let anyone get in her way.
Y'all might as well go home because I just fucking nailed that.
And she's become someone who can handle herself nowadays.
Do you know what happened to the last person who tried to kill me? I crushed her fucking head.
Though she might be suffering some PTSD from X and is convinced that the only person looking out for her is herself, and that other girls should follow suit. It's 1985, 6 years after the events of X, and Maxine is trying to make the transition from adult film star to legitimate Hollywood actor. Things are looking good for Maxine, but there's a mysterious black glove killer stalking and murdering the starlets of Hollywood and threatening to reveal her sinister past by sending her videotapes involving the events of X.
The past ain't finished with you, Maxine.
The 80s vibes are alive and well, and one of the best parts of the movie. The soundtrack, the costumes, location, all awesomely 80s. It feels like a love letter to Boogie Nights right from the get-go, with a long shot going through the strip club where Maxine works during the opening credits. The Los Angeles location is especially cool, mixing the glitz and glam of Hollywood with its darker side with lots of themes like religion and sin and some focus on the infamous satanic serial killers of Hollywood like the Night Stalker.
The Night Stalker. The Night Stalker.
Night Stalker.
Night Stalker.
The soundtrack is the best of the trilogy, with music from ZZ Top, Animotion, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, New Order, Motley Crue, Twisted Sister, Soft Cell, and Kim Carnes. But while the soundtrack is 80s inspired, the score is very much inspired by Mario Bava horror movies from the 70s. As mentioned, a lot of this movie is Bava inspired. The eerie score, the red lighting, the POV shots, and especially the unseen killer sporting black gloves. The supporting cast is great once again. It seems like everyone wanted to be in this movie after the success of X and Pearl, because the supporting cast is huge. Elizabeth Debicki is great as Elizabeth Bender, the director of Maxine's possible big break. She adds a real seriousness to the movie, and whenever she's on screen, you feel like you're in Maxine's shoes, and you just want to pay attention to whatever she has to say.
I understand. I'll do whatever you say.
Moses Sumney is good as Maxine's film buff friend Leon, who works in a movie rental store. Michelle Monaghan and Bobby Cannavale have a good cop dynamic. And Lily Collins, Halsey, and Sophie Thatcher all have great little roles that, while small, all have something to add and help create the world around Maxine.
Girls gotta look out for one another in this business.
And then, of course, we've got the impeccable Giancarlo Esposito from Breaking Bad, who is always good. And it's nice to see Kevin Bacon chewing up scenes in a horror movie again. He did get a start in the first Friday the 13th and went on to do horror movies like Tremors, Hollow Man, Stir of Echoes, and Footloose. Just kidding.
You do got the devil in you.
The makeup and effects are also pretty impressive. This character's decapitated head looks pretty damn good. It might be the best decapitated head I've ever seen in a horror movie, mostly in the fact that you can really tell who it's supposed to be, especially when the character is basically doing the same expression half an hour earlier. And when Leon gets slashed in the face with a knife, it looks really good too. And when Maxine shoots the film's big bad in the head with a shotgun, come on, perfection. As I mentioned, we do get a colder, more self-assured version of Maxine this time around, but sometimes it also seems like she takes a backseat to the exploitative vibe of the movie. As perfect and cool as it is as a period piece, sometimes scenes feel like they're just happening to appease the 80s homage, and are loosely connected to keep the story going. The movie comes dangerously close to losing itself and becoming what it's referencing. That is, an 80s exploitative thriller. The previous films were all about Maxine and Pearl, but in this one, Mia Goth seems to almost get lost behind all that. It could be that this is the third part of an already established world with characters we technically already know, but she just seems sidelined in her own movie. And in some scenes, she just doesn't respond to other characters' dialogue or even have any herself.
Are you listening to me?
Yeah?
See you around.
Yeah.
Say, you want something to drink? I'm on expense account.
The third act of the movie is also kind of a lot for me. It feels like it turns into a different movie. The film kind of alludes to the Night Stalker being the one who's after Maxine, but when that real-life serial killer is arrested in the movie, it's eventually revealed that the man in the black gloves is actually Maxine's father. It's not a bad move or anything, it's just kind of different from the rest of the series. The reveal that everyone saw coming a mile away isn't all that epic, and kind of grinds the momentum the movie had to a halt. He is mentioned in X, and the themes of religion and sin are there throughout all three movies. It's just that he seems too small or not significant enough to be the big bad of the finale of the series. Or it could be that this trilogy didn't even need a big bad. I just found myself more interested in the other side of the story in 80s Hollywood and the scenes on the Universal lot. There's just something about movies about making movies that I really like. Like I said, the ending doesn't really ruin the movie or anything, it does make sense, and delivers a mostly satisfying conclusion to the story Ty West and Mia Goth took us on for a couple years at the movies. Plus it does have a cool shootout. And on top of that, you're happy to see that after all she's been through, Maxine made it. She's come a long way from cutting her cocaine with a piece of cardboard and snorting with a $2 bill, graduating to a SAG card and using a $100 bill. Further proof that she's made it. Maxine lives out her dream and becomes a star, even if you think she deserved it or not, or if she truly is happy in the end.
Say it with me now. I will not accept a life I do not deserve.
Now for the references I mentioned earlier. Here's some that I caught. The opening footage of young Maxine dancing mirrors Pearl's audition dance. During Maxine's audition, part of the lines she's reciting are lifted directly from Pearl's monologue near the end of her movie.
Forcing me to do terrible, awful, murderous things. Terrible, awful, murderous things.
Maxine keeps cocaine in a goose jar, a reference to the goose Pearl kills with a pitchfork. When Maxine is seen on the Hollywood Boulevard Walk of Fame, she puts her cigarette out on the star of none other than Theda Bara. Theda Bara's name also appeared on the marquee in Pearl. Maxine's shirt says "We." Obviously a reference to the song "Oui Oui Marie" used in both X and Pearl, but less obviously a reference to the French porno magazine from the 1970s, Oui. Not that I've seen those, or even... When Leon is watching The Great Alligator at work, he watches a scene where a woman is attacked by an alligator, referencing Bobby Lynn's death in X. Maxine visits the Bates Motel set with Elizabeth, referencing the movie RJ loved in X.
What about in Psycho? You love that movie.
Elizabeth Bender mentions that Maxine's character in her movie is a powder keg, a reference to Pearl's farm. We see that Maxine has dyed her hair blonde in the third film, something the elderly Pearl hates after missing out on her dreams for not being blonde enough.
You know I don't like blondes.
The group of extras on the backlot in World War I costumes call back to Howard and Pearl, and both of Mia Goth's characters' parents accidentally light themselves on fire. When the movie is showing us footage of 80s Hollywood, we see an impersonator dressed as Wonder Woman. And who does Maxine say she wants to be just like in X?
I want the whole world to know my name. Like Linda Carter or some shit.
When Maxine watches The Puritan, the movie ends with the credits rolling over the lead actress's face, a reference to the ending of Pearl. And the movie Maxine itself ends in nearly the same way. And lastly, we get a reference to some dialogue from X at the end of the trilogy.
You're a fucking movie star. You're a fucking sex symbol.
Let me know if you spotted any references throughout the trilogy in the comments. Maxine premiered at the TCL Chinese Theater in Hollywood, Los Angeles on June 24th, 2024, with a wide release in the US on July 5th. It made $6.7 million on its opening weekend and eventually grossed $15.1 million in the US and Canada, with a combined $6.9 million in other territories for a worldwide total of $22 million, all on a budget of less than $20 million. Once again, the third film in the X trilogy was a hit with both critics and fans alike, praising its pastiche style and homage to 80s Hollywood. After Maxine, in February 2024, Ty West confirmed he was working on a fourth film in the series that he might use as his next project. But only 3 months later, in August 2024, during a Reddit AMA, he said that he is happy where he left the series, and that Maxine would most likely be the end. So which X film is the best? X was a fun look back at 70s slashers about sexually frustrated seniors versus some sexually liberal youth, and Pearl was a fantastic character study, but the 80s period piece that is Maxine is such a satisfying feast for the senses. If I had to pick one I like best, I'd probably have to go with Pearl. The characters in it are just too undeniably good. It had the most going for it in terms of story and writing, but I will say it's a tight race. And that's the X trilogy. It's really impressive that Ty West and Mia Goth made such an instantly iconic and well-regarded horror trilogy, one that actually delivers on the hype. While you can watch each X movie by itself, it's better to watch them all as they complement each other. It's interesting to see how they fit. Maxine wants to be a star, we see how Pearl wanted the same thing and failed, and then we see how Maxine made it. It's a roller coaster through and through. A horror trilogy for movie fans.
I just never wanted to end.
Thanks for watching The Lamphouse. If you like this video, or if you're a fan of action, horror, or just 80s movies in general, be sure to check out my other videos at the links in the description or playlists on the channel. I've got something for everyone here. Watching another video right after this one also really helps out with the algorithm, so feel free to check them out. And be sure to give this video a like and subscribe if you like what you see. See you soon!